It's a special episode of Pawn After Dark today because we don't have a guest. And Rick, you've been my boss for somewhere around 22 years. I've known you since I was 12. You've always been a boss to me.
A world-famous pawn shop filming day suddenly grinding to a halt, not because of a flashy deal, but due to a single, potentially life-threatening item. How carefully do you think a show like Pawn Stars vets its inventory before letting it air to millions? Behind the scenes, the reality was far more intense than viewers ever realized. From thermonuclear bomb parts to weapons that could explode, the items flowing through this shop challenged safety, legality, and common sense. One purchase was so dangerous it forced Rick Harrison to shut down filming for an entire week. This is the story they didn't want you to see. Behind the Pawn Stars set. When Pawn Stars first hit the airwaves in July 2009, it captured the curiosity of millions with its behind-the-counter negotiations and rare finds. But the reality behind the scenes was far more complex than the camera ever showed. The real gold and silver pawn shop on Las Vegas Boulevard was overwhelmed by an influx of up to 5,000 tourists a day, all eager to catch a glimpse of Rick Harrison and the gang. The line stretched down the block, and filming inside the bustling shop became near impossible without disrupting business. To solve this, the producers built a near-perfect replica of the pawn shop upstairs, a carefully controlled set where filming could proceed without interference. The entrance to this set was designed so viewers couldn't see outside, maintaining the illusion that it was the actual shop. While subtle differences in signs, layout, and merchandise existed, most viewers never noticed. This separation allowed the real pawn shop to operate below, while cameras rolled upstairs. The process of selecting items for television was also highly scripted and managed. Staff working in the real shop would identify unusual or highly valuable items during normal business hours and flag them for the production team. Producers would then invite sellers back for scheduled filming, ensuring that by the time cameras rolled, Rick and the full cast had already been briefed in detail on the item's history, authenticity, and estimated value. This carefully controlled environment meant that what appeared to be spontaneous negotiations on screen were anything but. Episodes that aired as 5-minute segments often took nearly an hour to film. The cast usually arrived only once everything was set up and the floor cleared of real customers. This blend of reality and production shaped the show's unique look. Real people, real items, but rehearsed and polished moments. Yet, this system of previewing and rehearsing was more than about convenience. It was about control, controlling what viewers saw and ensuring items fit the narrative of the show. Behind this filter was a powerful gatekeeping mechanism deciding which items made the cut and which never left the shadows. It was a process designed to balance captivating television with legal and safety concerns. Viewers watched as remarkable artifacts walked through the gold and silver doors, but many didn't realize they were watching a curated version of reality. The actual shop seldom functioned like a typical pawn business during filming hours. Instead, the production's filter shaped both the story and the exposure of items. Despite their scripted nature, the segments showed incredible finds, from unique memorabilia to historical relics. But this raised a persistent question. If this was what was allowed through, what stories and items were deliberately kept away from the cameras? There was more to the filter than met the eye. Behind the glitz of the set and polish of the show, the reality of what came through those doors was often as dangerous as it was fascinating. Dangerous items that made it through. Pawn Stars wasn't just about vintage guitars and antique jewelry. Over its many seasons, the show featured some of the most unusual and hazardous items anyone could imagine, passing a pre-screening process. From decommissioned nuclear bomb parts to missile guidance systems, the objects on display pushed the boundaries of what seemed safe or even legal to own. One early standout was a thermonuclear warhead's nose cover offered for just $625, a piece of one of the most destructive weapons in U.S. history. rendered inert but still charged with symbolic danger. This set the tone that extraordinary and potentially dangerous artifacts could find their way to the counter. Then came authentic Cold War hardware, an infrared guidance section from a Sidewinder heat-seeking missile, decommissioned and deemed legally ownable, but nonetheless a real fragment of military technology designed to slay. Rick's unease was clear here. He joked about ending up on a government no-fly list, showing the genuine tension of handling such gear. The show also aired a real stolen submarine, a one-person submersible that couldn't have been more out of place inside a pawn shop. The submarine had disappeared years before from a private estate, and only came to light because a lawyer happened to see the episode on television. The legal implications and risks were enormous, yet it still aired. Rick lost money on that deal, and police confirmed the seller was unaware of the theft. A particularly tense moment on the show involved a rusty, corroded 1850s pepper box revolver. An expert warned it could explode when fired. Despite the danger, Rick made an offer with a risk premium attached, and the segment was filmed and aired including the warning. The production embraced the risk as part of the dramatic tension, a rare example of danger entering primetime family TV. This filter was not about censoring risk or danger, it was about selecting drama. A weapon that might explode, made for compelling television. Cold War technology and nuclear hardware fit perfectly into the narrative that hooked millions. But the risk wasn't removed, it was simply repackaged as entertainment. Yet even with years of dangerous and unusual items passing through, none unsettled Rick Harrison quite like the next piece to enter the shop's story. Despite his vast experience and history with weapons and explosives, this particular item forced a reaction unlike anything seen before. When objects that could slay filled the shelves, the question became, what finally forced the pawn shop star to press pause? The thermonuclear warhead cover. One of the most astonishing items ever to pass the Pawn Star's vetting system was the nose cover from a B-57 tactical nuclear weapon. Designed between 1959 and 1993, the B-57 thermonuclear bomb was extremely versatile. It could be dropped from fighter jets, deployed from helicopters, and even detonated underwater. Its explosive yield ranged up to 20 kilotons, rivaling and sometimes exceeding the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The nose cover Rick purchased was one of only about 430 ever officially released as collector's items by Sandia National Laboratories, the U.S. government facility responsible for dismantling nuclear weapons. Each came with a plaque certifying its authenticity and inert status, indicating it was safe and legally transferable into private hands once rendered harmless. To verify the seller's claim, Rick brought in an expert who took the cover to the National Atomic Testing Museum in Las Vegas. There, they tested its dimensions by fitting it onto a diffused B-57 warhead already in the museum's collection. The fit was perfect, confirming both the cover's authenticity and the legality of its provenance. Against intuition, Rick paid $625 for this Cold War relic, treating it as a collectible piece of history rather than something to fear. The episode aired on the History Channel without incident, presenting this nuclear hardware as an unusual but compelling item. Millions watched Rick handle it like any other pawn shop artifact. This purchase symbolized the show's approach to danger and entertainment. The real hazards were acknowledged, but carefully framed as part of the story. The larger context was that the government had been legally releasing thermonuclear weapon parts for years, and this item fit perfectly within those regulated margins. Viewer reactions varied wildly. Many stunned that a thermonuclear warhead component could be legally sold in a pawn shop. But in truth, much of the legal and security process unfolded quietly off-camera. The show never detailed how the seller obtained the item or documented its chain of custody beyond the museum verification. This event underscored how blurred the lines could be between danger and legality in the show's world. it raised questions about what might be on the verge of crossing the line from safe to too risky, from dramatic to reckless. As more perilous items appeared, the show's safety net would soon be challenged like never before. The exploding gun incident. Among the many unusual and sometimes hazardous items that passed the show's vetting process was an old pepperbox revolver, a multi-barrel handgun from the 1850s. The seller had purchased it at an estate sale and brought it to the pawn shop on his wedding day, hoping the sale would help buy a gift for his new wife. The gun looked antique, but expert Tony quickly identified it as dangerously corroded and unstable. Its metal had fatigued over time, meaning it could potentially explode when fired. Tony explained that old barrels don't typically fail by misfiring, but by rupturing. When the gun fires, expanding gases need containment, and if the metal gives way, those gases escape violently through weak spots, posing serious harm to the user holding the weapon. Rick Harrison, despite the warning, made a real financial offer: $200 if the gun didn't fire and $300 if it did. The extra $100 was essentially assigning a price to the risk of injury. Chumley, who had worked at the gold and silver pawn shop long before the show aired, was the one asked to pull the trigger. Known for his laid-back persona and often the comic relief, this moment was surprisingly tense. With the expert's caution fresh in the room, everyone watched as he fired the weapon. To everyone's relief, the gun held together and fired safely. What aired on television captured that tension perfectly. The segment built suspense around the risk, using the expert's warning as a pivotal part of the story. The humor, hesitancy, and eventual success made the moment compelling viewing and one of the most talked-about scenes of the season. Yet, behind the scenes, the fact remained clear. They knowingly dealt with a potentially lethal weapon. This episode highlighted that the show's vetting wasn't a safety review, but rather a content review. The question wasn't whether something was dangerous, it was whether that danger heightened the drama and made for good television. The exploding gun was risky, but it added to the narrative, fitting perfectly into the show's blend of risk and entertainment. Despite the inclusion of such hazardous items, it was clear the production was willing to tolerate a certain level of danger if it supported the storytelling. The gun could have seriously injured someone, but the segment aired unedited, dangers and all. Dangers. It illustrated how risk was framed as spectacle rather than something to be concealed entirely. This willingness to allow real danger on screen raised questions about the limits of what was acceptable. If an unstable firearm could be shown, what other items were tested or censored? The show's behind-the-scenes filter selected for drama, sometimes at the expense of safety. The presence of genuine danger in the gun episode was a hint that the pawn shop's inventory could contain items far more unsettling. The Soviet launch keys. After months and years of handling everything from cannons to nuclear parts, Rick Harrison faced an item unlike anything before: 2 small metal keys, ordinary at first glance but carrying immense historical weight. The guest explained these were Soviet launch keys associated with intercontinental ballistic missiles, acquired from a close friend of a prominent Soviet cosmonaut school official. Rick, now accustomed to dangerous artifacts, was skeptical. The keys seemed almost too plain, like something anyone could fabricate. To clarify, Rick called in Mark, the administrator of the Clark County Museum. Mark instantly recognized the circular etchings as characteristic Soviet-era launch hardware, but then corrected the room's assumption. Rather than missile launch keys, these were actually keys used for launching spacecraft at the very facility where cosmonauts trained for missions into orbit. In other words, they were rarer and arguably even more significant than nuclear launch keys. The reality hit the room hard. Mark admitted that he had been expecting the end of the world, but what he actually held was the key to the stars. The gravity of this realization sent chills through Rick, who confessed his reaction openly. Despite years of dealing with weapons and explosives, this was the first time he visibly hesitated, a rare moment of pause from a man who'd seemed almost unfaltering. Chumley, standing beside him, held one of the keys. It was an odd juxtaposition, a man often cast as the company's comic foil, clutching an object with profound historical and symbolic power. Rick joked that one turn could destroy the world, an ironic line that masked the unease beneath the humor. For the first time on camera, Rick's instinct was not curiosity, but caution. Rick offered $1,500, a serious sum, but one that reflected his uncertainty. The guest declined, and the keys walked out of the shop alongside the owner. This moment marked a boundary of sorts, a line where fascination met fear, and the show's usual rhythm was disrupted. Throughout 16 seasons, Rick had handled cannons, nuclear bomb components, and missile guidance systems without flinching. Yet this simple pair of keys unsettled him in a way none of those others had. The symbolic weight and potential consequences these keys represented filled the room with a tension unlike any seen before. This hesitation was significant because it revealed a rarely seen side of Rick Harrison, the man behind the TV persona. It was a moment of genuine human reaction, reminding viewers that beyond the deals and drama was a dealer who understood the gravity of what he was handling. For him, this item demanded respect and restraint rather than excitement. The question remained, what happened next to push Rick and the show beyond their limits? The shutdown and its aftermath. Rick Harrison's hesitation over the Soviet launch keys marked a critical turning point in the history of Pawn Stars. For the first time in 16 seasons, the man known for his calm and calculated demeanor visibly faltered, signaling that the usual rhythm of business had reached its breaking point. This wasn't just another unusual artifact. It was an item that carried profound symbolic and potential real-world consequences. The weight of that moment pushed Rick to make a rare and difficult decision. He shut down filming for an entire week to assess the situation and its implications. This pause wasn't about theatrics or television drama, it was about responsibility. Having handled everything from thermonuclear warhead covers to explodable firearms, Rick knew this item demanded unprecedented caution. The production team and shop staff had to reevaluate safety protocols, legal considerations, and how such sensitive objects should be managed moving forward. That week-long shutdown reflected not only concern for the shop and cast, but also for public perception and the boundaries of what could be shown. Following this disruption, Pawn Stars maintained its tight vetting process, but the incident underscored the precarious balance the show had played for over 2 decades. The series relied heavily on a carefully curated filter that decided what was safe, legal, and interesting enough for broadcast. Yet, the Launch Keys episode revealed that, even with extensive checks, some items edged too close to zones of moral and legal ambiguity. This moment quietly illuminated the limits of that filter's control. Beyond the shop itself, the fallout rippled through the loyal fan base and the world of collectible militaria. Fans learned an uncomfortable truth. Not every item allowed on camera was without risk, nor was every sale without consequence. The show's producers and the Harrison family had negotiated a fine line between captivating television and the responsibilities inherent in dealing with dangerous or sensitive artifacts. This interruption was the clearest sign that the line was real and sometimes crossed. In the years following the shutdown, Pawn Stars faced changes that reflected both internal dynamics and the evolving landscape of television. The show's contract with the History Channel ended, and filming paused indefinitely in 2024. Corey Harrison departed, seeking to leave behind the television character he had portrayed, while Rick and Chumley readied themselves for a new chapter. The family business on Las Vegas Boulevard continued, but the filter that had so long shaped the show's narrative was no longer in place. In early 2025, Rick and Chumley launched Pawn After Dark, a podcast recorded at the real gold and silver pawn shop, with none of the production oversight that had dictated the show for years. This unfiltered version brought back the raw reality of the pawn business, the curiosities, the risks, and the unpredictable stories. It was a return to roots, but also a reminder of what had been managed for public consumption on television. The dangers and oddities didn't vanish. They simply emerged without the polish of scripted approval. As the new decade advances, Pawn Stars remains an iconic cultural touchstone, albeit transformed. Rick and Chumley's continued presence honors the shop's legacy while acknowledging how far the business and the show have come. The shutdown over those keys and the decision to halt filming revealed that beneath every fascinating artifact lay real stakes, physical, legal, and ethical. It was a lesson in humility and caution for fans and dealers alike. Rick Harrison's decision to halt filming exposes the fragile line between fascination and danger in the world of rare collectibles. It reminds us that behind every remarkable artifact is a real story, sometimes darker than we expect. If you found this inside look into Pawn Stars intriguing, please like and subscribe for more deep dives into the unexpected sides of history and pop culture. Thanks for watching.